Hi, shalom, friends. Um, are you keeping up with the advertisements for cell phones? I mean, it's amazing what they offer today. You could speak all you want, whenever you want, to whomever you want, wherever that person might be, all for a flat fee. I mean, I'm not that old, but I remember that making phone calls overseas was very expensive. Even regular long distance was prohibitive. You always used to think, should I make the phone call? But today, I guess talk is, as they say, talk is cheap. So we do a lot of talking. And yet we also know there's something called silence is golden. So I ask you, if talk is cheap, silence is golden, which one would you want to choose? I think to myself, a little bit humorously, that today people actually pay a lot of money for silence. They pay very little for words. So a lot of people feel that they have to take a break of all of the words. So they spend sometimes thousands of dollars to go to a retreat where they don't talk for 7 days. Sometimes people will travel very far distances to study at the feet of a great man who says nothing. So I guess silence really is golden. What does Judaism have to say about this? Should we use speech and speech in abundance, or should we keep our peace and keep silence? I'm sure many of you have heard what I was told. Look, Ari, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. The lesson is to hear twice as much as you speak. Well, everything in Judaism is not extreme at all. Judaism basically takes many different goods and combines them and synthesizes them to something of beauty. It is told of a king of old who had philosophers that spoke about the importance of speech and how one conveys information through speech. And there were other philosophers and theologians that claimed that God is found in silence. Very often, the most powerful form of education is being quiet. So the king asked that representatives of these 2 streams of thought should actually present their case. So the court was full, and one philosopher representing the importance of speech spoke. Well, he actually spoke. He was eloquent, the words were beautifully formed, the ideas were adequately conveyed, and people were just enamored. The way he spoke, what he said, the content that he said, and he obviously received a very high degree of acceptance. And then the king asked for the second fellow, the second gentleman, to present the case of silence. And he got up and after greeting all of the esteemed assembly, he began his speech. But in the middle of the speech, the first fellow who advocated speech went over and slapped him, which shocked everyone, not only the speaker, but everyone in the court. And for a moment there was silence, and then one of the officers went over to him and said, "How dare you slap a person in front of the king? What has gotten into you?" He said, "I had to do it. He was insulting the king and I had to stop him from the insult." They said, "What are you talking about? He started off so beautifully by greeting everyone appropriately and paying homage to the king." He said, "Yes, but what is he supposed to be doing? He's supposed to be presenting the case of silence. And what is he doing? He's presenting his case for silence through speech. That's usurping mine." Or he's almost as if he's camouflaging his thought in my thought. That's deceitful and that's obviously disrespectful. Well, what the outcome was, I do not know, but you get the gist of the story. Sometimes to describe the greatness of silence, you need speech. Let's reflect for a moment. When people speak, there has to be pauses in between the words and in between the paragraphs. This is not only true for the punchline of a good story or joke, but in general, when one conveys information, it just can't be one long run-on sentence. Those spaces, those intervals are silence. And that silence actually gives the wisdom expressed in thought and expressed through speech a much greater depth. Indeed, the rabbis tell us that when Moses was on the mountain and God was teaching him for 40 days and for 40 nights, he actually paused in between some of his teachings to allow Moses to absorb the divine message. So here, is Judaism's response. Which is better, speech and silence? Well, King Solomon said there's a time to speak, there's a time to be silent. But the true beauty is when speech and silence come together. That's not a contradiction in terms. On the contrary, you speak and convey, and then you stop. And you wait, and you allow that person the time that he needs to reflect. Often it has been said that a teacher teaches, but nothing was taught. How could that be? The teacher comes, prepares his lesson, and talks and talks and talks. But the children, the students, have not been educated. They have never had time to absorb the information before there's an avalanche of new information and more information. Actually, when you think about it, we're being overwhelmed with information. We need a little silence. We need a little distance. Or today, in common parlance, we need a little space. And Judaism advocates both. True teaching should not be through silence. True teaching should be through judicious words, proper words, effective words. But in order for those wonderful words to take effect, you do need a sense of silence, of reflection, of introspection, and indeed of giving space. Well, it's not an easy task to know how to merge the two. Sometimes it's easier to go to an extreme. I'm just quiet, I will not talk, or I will talk and not listen. But of course, as human beings that represent the best and the finest of God's creatures on earth, we know that we could actually do both. So I'm happy for you, happy for myself that I had the opportunity to talk, and happy listening. Shalom.
לא ישון, לא יום ולא ישון שומע ישראל